Okay, so we're going to go through some practice work evaluating algebraic expressions. So I'm going to start with a little overview and then we'll work it through with examples, and just stop me at any time.
Okay.
So in all of these problems, we're going to kind of use the same strategy of like plugging and chugging in numbers. And there's 3 steps to this problem, to this strategy. The first step is the formula step, where we're going to start with whatever we're given. So we're going to always like read a problem and ask ourselves like, what are we given? And that's going to be our starting point.
Okay.
And then the next step is the plug step or the substitute step, where we're going to see what variables are we given and what numbers can we replace them with. And we're going to see how like we do that in the problems. And the last step is the chug step or the solve step, where we're just then going to solve it through and work it all out. So it's easiest to see an example, so we're going to just jump into that. So here's a problem you might see. This says, find the value of x plus 2 when x equals 3. So find the value just means we just want to solve what is x plus 2 if x equals 3. So what we're given here is this formula of x plus 2. So that's what we're going to start with. And x is a variable, and it's telling us that that's a variable that equals the number 3. So I put both the x and the x equals 3 in blue, because those really mean the same thing. And once I know that those mean the same thing, that's how I know what I'm going to plug or substitute in. So I see the x is here, so I'm going to plug in that value of 3 instead of x. So my goal is always to replace those variables with numbers. And that's that substitute step. So now I have 3 plus 2, much less intimidating. I don't have any variables left, so that means I'm just ready to solve it. And I see that it's 5.
Okay.
And that's it. Every time we're just going to start with what we're given, substitute in the numbers we need, and then solve them through. All right, let's look at one more example then. So this problem says find the value of RT when R equals 40 and T equals 3. So this is a similar problem in some ways, but also different. We see right away that there's 2 different variables, but the same strategy is going to work. So I'm going to start with what I'm given. I'm given RT, and I'm given a value for R and a value for T. So I'm just going to substitute in both. So I'll replace that R with 40 and that T with 3. And there isn't a multiplication sign there, but when there's 2 variables next to each other, that's just hidden multiplication. So I put that in with the numbers. And now again, I got rid of the variables, so that means I'm just ready to solve. And that's our strategy. The one thing we want to add to that is sometimes there's going to be problems where that third step is more than one step, because there's more than one thing that has to be done. So when we see that there are more complicated problems, the other thing we're going to have to do is follow the order of operations. And we do this when there's a problem with just numbers, and we also do this when there's variables. And what this is telling us is that the order in which we solve math problems matters. We can't just solve them left to right. There's some operations, things we do to numbers, that get a higher priority that should go first above other things. And there's a shortcut for that that's called Pemdas, or we could remember that by the expression, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And what that's telling us is that P stands for parentheses, the circles that say do that first, and that's our grouping symbol. It's the first thing that we have to simplify. The E stands for exponents. We'll see a problem with that. M is for multiplication, D for division, A for addition, and S for subtraction. So when we solve these problems, we won't work left to right, but we're going to work down this list of priorities. So we're going to add those 2 things together now to do a few more practice problems. This problem says find the value of 3y minus 7 when y equals 5. So again, back to that plug and chug method, we'll start with what we're given. We're given 3y minus 7. So I'll start by writing that down. And I'm also given a value for y. So in that plug step, I'm going to plug in y equals 5. I'm going to plug in 5 for y. So I get 3 times 5 minus 7. That parentheses just means multiplication. But now, because there are two different operations going on, there's this multiplication and this subtraction, I can't just solve it left to right. I have to solve it in order of the order of operations. So when I look on this list, I don't have any parentheses or exponents, so I'll pass those, but I do have multiplication. This is hidden multiplication. So I have to do that first. So the first thing I'm going to do is that multiplication, 3 times 5. And I get 15. Now there's only one thing left, and that's subtraction, which came lower on my priority list, and I'll do that next. And I get 8. We're going to look at one more example here. We're going to do the same thing, but there's two variables. So this is evaluate 4 parentheses x minus y when x is 6 and y is 3. Evaluate, just another word for solve, so that's telling me to do the same thing. I start with what I'm given, so I'll just write that down. I'm given 4 times x minus y in parentheses. And again, I have numbers that I'm going to replace those variables with. Every time I see x, I'll replace it with 6. Every time I see y, I'll replace it with 3. And I go ahead and plug them in. But now, before I solve this, I don't just want to go left to right across the page like I'm reading. I want to go down the order of operations, which tells me what order to do things in first. And what's the first thing in my order of operations?
Do the parentheses first.
The parentheses, right. So that's telling me to simplify in here first. So that's what I'll do. Inside the parentheses is 6 minus 3. So that's 3. And now I only have left is that multiplication. So I just have to multiply. All right, we'll look at one more example that's a bit trickier, but it's the same steps. Now we have this big expression we're going to evaluate, and we're given, again, different numbers for those variables. So we'll start with that expression we're given, that formula, and just write it down. Every time I see x, you see I see it twice, I'm going to replace it with 5. And every time I see y, I'm going to replace that with -2. So the first thing I'm going to do is replace those numbers. Now I'm only dealing with numbers. Now there's a lot going on in this problem, but luckily we don't just have to do it left to right. What's the first thing I'm going to focus on?
Parentheses.
The parentheses, right. So that's right in here. And I focus in here and not in here. The parentheses at the end have just the 5. I don't have to simplify anything in there, it's just a number, so that's telling me it's done. But this 5 plus -2, because there's more than one thing going on, that means I have to simplify that. Think about that like a number line. It's like taking 5 steps forward and 2 steps back. So I get 3. What's the next thing I have to do in my order of operations?
Multiplication.
What comes right after parentheses?
Oh, exponents.
Exponents. And is there any exponents in here?
Yes.
Yeah. Right, there's that one up there. And exponents, when it's a square, that just means the number by itself. So 3 squared is 3 times 3.
That would be 9. So it would be 9 times 2.
Perfect. So now I can just rewrite that problem as 9 times 2. What's my next step?
18 minus.
Multiplication. Isn't it?
Yeah.
18, right, so multiplication. So I get 18 there. What am I going to get when I do 4 times 5?
20.
20. And I'll do all that multiplication before I do that subtraction step. So I'll do that in one step. And now I only have one operation left. I have 18 minus 20. What am I going to get?
-2.
Awesome, -2. So this one had multiple operations in it, but it was fine because we just worked down the order. So to summarize, kind of two things we did here. One is this column on the left was this plug and chug of formula substitute solve method, where we always started with what we were given. We replaced any variables we saw with the numbers we were given for it, and then we completed that math problem. But then sometimes those math problems had more than one step, so we had to follow the order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally told us the list. What parentheses come first, then exponents. Then we do any multiplication and division. Then we do any addition or subtraction. And that's kind of simplifying for us because then wouldn't we have problems like that last one, We don't have to just work across from left to right. We know where to start. Right. That's all.